The Bunzerelly Show.
I decided to go back and start looking at some of the classic movies, like when I went back and I looked at Force Awakens. So this week what I decided to do was take a revisit to the first Iron Man, which you could trace back to being the beginning of this whole phase with the MCU, which is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It all started here with Iron Man. It was very interesting to go back and take a look at that, just to go through the history of it. If, you've probably heard me talk about it before, but back in the day, Marvel was going bankrupt as far as when it was just a comic book company. And what they had done was they had sold off the different comic book rights. They sold off their hottest properties, which were Spider-Man and X-Men. So they sold X-Men to Fox and Spider-Man to Sony. So I think it was X-Men that came out first. That was a big hit, ahead of its time. I mean, that was the one that kind of broke the mold and said, hey, we could do these special effects. We could have guys fly and stuff. And, whatever you imagine, you can pretty much make happen in the movie, and that's what's happening now. And X-Men kicked that off. After that was Spider-Man. So all of a sudden, Marvel's like, whoa, we still got some guys left. Who can we use? So they start going after their B-list characters. When they have left is Avengers. When I say B-list, they're not B-list now. Avengers is the hottest thing out there. It's hotter than X-Men. Give Spider-Man a run for money. It's the hottest thing out there now. But the thing with Avengers is, as far as the comics were concerned, it was not the most popular comic book. I mean, I never bought Iron Man or Captain America. I knew who they were. It wasn't the hottest comic book. So it was interesting to see. But the MCU in itself has just been a success right from the bat, and it's funny when you go back and trace it to its roots and what kicked it off. What you could really thank everything to as far as the MCU is the success of 2008's Iron Man. Iron Man's been on a roller coaster of adventures. I'm going to kind of dig into that, but Iron Man is just, that first Iron Man movie just started solid. Kind of taken aback a bit when you first watch it because you see how young Robert Downey Jr. is. You're kind of taken aback for a second, but, it's like 10 years before because you're just knowing the character so much. But right away, in the movie opens, you're already taken to his, like, not his abrasiveness, but somewhat like his arrogance and his, like, little millionaire playboy thing that Batman tries to fake, but Tony Stark really is. But really quickly, when that car explodes and everything, you kind of really quickly see how, when he's hit by shrapnel by that Stark missile, and all of a sudden, that sense of duty starts building up in him right away. Like, he knows something's wrong, and he's down to figure it out. Even, like, when he wakes up as a hostage in that military base, he's already got his eyes out, like, I got to get out of here and fix that. And so he comes across, first of all, we got the first James Rhodes, which was Terrence Howard, and now it's Don Cheadle, and it took a while for Don Cheadle to grow on us, but, comfortable with, but, you kind of look back and you wonder, how would things have been if Terrence Howard would have stayed as War Machine or James Rhodes? It would be interesting to see, but I think he was the first one to kind of get a little like, well, Edward Norton had made the same mistake with the Hulk. He started like demanding too much money and everything. And what they had to do was they said, like, listen, we can't make these big budget cross-star films if you guys are going to be doing this. So if you don't like what we have to offer, you got to take a hike. And it happened with Edward Norton with his Hulk movie. And it happened with Terrence Howard. And even the Hulk, when the Hulk that you see in Avengers, I mean, that second Hulk movie, not the Eric Bana one, but the one with the Edward Norton, that was a Marvel Studios Hulk. I think there was some involvement with Universal, but Tony Stark actually makes a cameo. The plan was for that Hulk to be the Hulk we see now in Avengers. But after that, the fiasco with Edward Norton, what they did do is they maintained a continuity. And even the General, his name escapes me right now, but the General who is in Civil War is from that Hulk movie. So they maintained everything about that continuity except the actual actor playing the Hulk, which, is going to come up again as these actors get older or their contracts run out. Interesting to see how that's going to play out. But right away, he refers to the Manhattan. His father was involved with the Manhattan Project, which we can assume was the Captain America thing. Tony Stark, not knowing much about his past, and I don't even think they knew back at that point in time where they were going to go with the whole Tony Stark's father and the involvement in S.H.I.E.L.D. and all that. But, I'm sure they weren't looking that far ahead. But it's very interesting. And part of the fun of it, you have that fun of the guy, like, learning his moves and designing his costume. And, you're watching basically the Iron Man armor get built from start to finish. I mean, from the start, from the Mach 1. I mean, he's just welding that thing in a cave. And it's look into his arrogance, how you could see like his arrogance not only comes from being like super rich, but also super smart. I mean, I'm sure you've met super smart people that are complete assholes, but you kind of see where he's coming from and his train of thought, but how he's that sense of duty, because there's a difference between being an asshole and being like a monster. And he doesn't want, he's a little aloof to the whole like what's going on with the weapons and everything until like, he doesn't really take it seriously until he actually sees like, his weapons are being dealt under the table to terrorists. And that really fuels his escape, I think, more than his wanting to stay alive and wanting to escape is to right that wrong. And right away, as soon as he makes that escape and he leaves, and that the building of the armor was intense. The doctor was cool. Dr. Jensen, which we actually see again in Iron Man 3, which is had its own flaw. Wasn't perfect. Actually, it wasn't really that great at all. And even Iron Man 2. The funny thing about Iron Man is, to hop back and forth, I find that I think his story, as much like you look back and you could see where his sense of duty is and where he kind of gets those thoughts of like righting his wrongs and making things right. That storyline, most of the solo, you could argue certain movies are filler movies, like maybe some of the Thors or the first Captain America, whereas Captain America just took off after that. But the Iron Man 2 and 3, I like following Tony Stark's adventure. I take more of his character growth and development as Avengers and Ultron, because a sense of duty of like righting his wrongs, protecting the world, develops in Iron Man 1. In Avengers, he's kind of like sees that greater scope of the universe, and he sees that wormhole and sees what's going on as far as what's out there, and there's like a bigger picture out there, which fuels his creation of Ultron in Avengers 2. And that's where Tony Stark, it's like he overdoes it, and he's like, you're shooting the ball too far because now you're trying to overcompensate. And you're trying to fight fire with fire, and you made a bigger fire, and that's what happened in Avengers Age of Ultron, which then that comes to Civil War, which is where Tony Stark is, he's talking about Captain America, and he's, we need to be held accountable, even though really it's his own guilt from the creation of Ultron and the deaths caused by Ultron. But like I'm saying, that storyline doesn't really develop in the Iron Man movies. I mean, really, Iron Man 3 looked like that was Robert Downey Jr. like they were trying to wrap up something. It didn't really wrap up anything because he's like done being Iron Man and he's right back at it in Avengers 2. And Iron Man 2, the villain was a little weak, and the villain was kind of forgettable. It was Whiplash. He was okay. Really, I love Iron Man 2 because I'm a big War Machine fan, and I could watch that scene over and over with Iron Man back to back with War Machine. It's really what sold it for me. Even back in the comics days, I was just big fan of War Machine. And so yeah, Iron Man 1's really the beginning of his journey and the beginning of his character developments that's going to happen in the other movies in the MCU. And like I said, 2 and 3 really didn't do nothing. And even like Spider-Man still kind of follows that journey. Spider-Man Homecoming follows the journey of like Tony Stark, and he's just like, now he has like an even greater sense of responsibility, and he wants to play it safe, which is why he has the training wheels on Peter Parker, and is trying to protect him and being a little overly fatherly and overprotective of him. And then, of course, you have the conflict. Now, the one thing Iron Man 1 has, and once again, a lot of these things are probably done without like much foresight, is because Obadiah, which is Jeff Bridges' character, I mean, that was the best part of that's, and it's really the best thing Iron Man's had as far as being close to an arch nemesis, because everything else has been kind of forgettable. I mean, the Mandarin and whoever the real villain was in Iron Man 3, I can't remember what he was about. It was just, Obadiah, had they thought ahead and really played it out, I mean, I don't know how they could have played out. I would love to see them like that character live and kind of be more in the long run. But you know what? There was no telling how successful and what this thing was going to launch. I mean, how would anybody know that Robert Downey Jr. was going to play Iron Man for like 6 movies after that? There was no telling that was going to happen. So, it was just, a surprise success and kicked off everything. So good for them. What I do like is the, Pepper Potts, played by Gwyneth Paltrow. It's like that relationship. We've kind of watched that develop and blossom. I don't know if I like the turns that relationship has taken, because it kind of just felt forced and rushed. I like kind of like in one, there's like that little romantic tension, and they kind of just made it happen in 2. But I don't know, because then they kind of drift apart in Avengers. You don't see her, and then surprise, she shows back up for Spider-Man. But I do like that the romantic chemistry in that movie and her place in that role there. Robert Downey Jr. has said, I want to stop doing Iron Man before it kind of gets sad, before it gets too old or it's a joke. And you say, well, how does Iron Man go out? And the way I think it needs to be done is Iron Man needs his Logan movie. Like, I know you've had an Iron Man trilogy, and now he's doing the Avengers movies and everybody else's movies, but you know what? Let's give us an Iron Man 4 and kind of call back to 1, 2, and 3 and just have everything wrap up and give him that villain and give us the personal story that Iron Man 3 just kind of tried to be but couldn't put the nail on the head. But when it comes to the point where Robert Downey Jr. is done being Iron Man, then that's when he needs to sign off and do it in his own movie, even call it like Tony, you know what I mean, like a throwback to Logan or whatever. But all in all, if you haven't, I've been going back now. I'm going to do a lot more of these where I cover kind of like the older classic movies. I'm going to be looking at the Batman trilogies, The Matrix, some of those older things. So it is fun. So I suggest you go through your DVD player and see what you got that's been sitting there, blow some dust off or something. But go back in the Wayback Machine and see some of those older movies, see how they translate. So we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for listening.